Today I want to share my weekly setup in the Hobonichi Cousin. I'm filming this on the Monday and I'll show you how the spread ends up looking like at the end of the week later in the video. The first thing I do every day is move this dot sticker to the current day. It helps to keep track of where I am in the month, and I mostly added this out of necessity. I mentioned this in my functional planning video, but I write down what I want to focus on for the week on the sidebar of the monthly spread. And then at the end of the week, or in this case, the start of the next one, I put an arrow, then what I actually ended up focusing on or getting done. That helps me in deciding what I need to focus on for the week I'm actually starting, and I'm writing that down on the sidebar as well. Here, I'm just checking if I have anything new I need to schedule for the month or something that's moved, and this is just me moving something I had down for Friday to today. I've also moved my habit tracker, or as I like to call it, my daily to-dos, to the bottom of the monthly spread, and I'm just filling that in. I switched from doing dots and crosses to these filled in squares. I picked this up from Rue on Paper, whose trackers look very pretty and satisfying, so I'm trying that out. You'll see me switch back and forth between the current week, last week, and the monthly spread a lot. From the monthly spread, I'm migrating anything scheduled for the week to my sidebar, marking the column that indicates the day of the week. These are events, appointments, and I actually also have some scheduled tasks that I have to do on a specific day. These are all actionable items, so I'm marking them with a circle. I actually used to put my habit tracker on this weekly sidebar, but I was running out of space for the scheduled items, so that's why they're moved to the bottom of my monthly spread now. I also put down my total expenses on the sidebar of my weekly spread, so I've put that heading down at the top of the column because otherwise sometimes I forget and run out of space on the left here before I get around to assigning a row for my weekly expenses. Then from the previous week, I'm migrating unfinished tasks to this one. I usually always fold the cousin in on itself to create an even surface to write on. The 180-degree binding is one of the most important features of the cousin for me, and I don't know why I don't do it from the beginning in this video. I think I was too preoccupied with setting up the camera, but that's just what I'm doing here. I also migrate tasks from this sticky note from the previous week, where I had been noting down tasks that I either knew I wanted to assign to the coming week or just didn't fit in the weekly spread that I was in. Some of those I actually did get done and crossed off the week before. But some of these items are just things that I had to note down really quickly and say I can't flip to the monthly page or whatever relevant page quick enough. So I just put that down there. I guess it's what people sometimes call an inbox or a dashboard. I'm not sure if this counts technically, but that's how the sticky note works for me. So I just stick that on my new week while I'm setting up and crossing off each item as I go. I'm marking the tasks on the previous week with a chevron sign, the same as when you migrate something in a bullet journal, just so I know that's been moved to the current week. When I find a task that I decide I don't need to get done after all, I just cross it off. And I make sure to do that instead of crossing off the dot, just so I don't confuse it with something that's finished. I'm fiddling a lot with the blotting paper here because I'm using a Sarasa gel pen in 0.7 and it's very, very wet. Even after blotting it, it still smudges sometimes, but I like it too much to switch, honestly. On the weekly spread itself, I'm just writing down tasks, dividing them up based on categories that I've assigned to the different columns. Starting with this week, I've put the categories above where the grid starts just to gain more space since I was kind of running out in the past week. And it seemed like the empty space at the top of the column was a bit of a waste. But I just followed the grid right below as a guide anyway, so it worked just fine. So I'm going through last week's spread one last time to make sure everything's either crossed off or migrated and that I haven't missed anything. I use these magnetic bookmarks to mark my weekly and monthly pages, so I'm also moving that to the right weekly page. I don't throw out last week's sticky note since the whole point of my book is that I want to have a record of what was already finished or migrated. The things on the sticky note are less reliable, I guess, because they're more like scribbles, and crossing them off makes them less legible, but I still keep it anyway on their respective weeks. I also grab a new sticky note for this current week. And that's how my monthly and weekly spread looks like at the beginning of the week after I've set up. It's been a week since I filmed the setup, and this is how my spread is looking. I got quite a bit done this week, and I've actually changed some things, so I'll walk you through them. I found that because the grid in the Cousin is very small, the crosses and dots marking each task weren't distinct enough, and I was having trouble seeing at a glance where my open tasks were. So this week I switched to doing this big slash for when a task is done. I don't think I like the look of this honestly, and I've decided to try something else next week. The habit tracker I had moved to the bottom of the monthly page, but I ended up not liking the way it looked. I think part of it is because I wasn't using a stencil or ruler or anything, so the squares didn't look as neat and they were really bothering me. I decided to try using a colored pencil on the sidebar instead. This is how I mark my yearly index page, so it felt like a good idea. I thought it might look nice once the month is all filled out. I do always like it when I can use one space for multiple things, and this allows me to do this tracker as well as keep my notes on the side here. I'm still not 100% sure I like it. I backfilled April's tracker to see what it might look like with a full month, and I really can't decide. Filling it out just didn't feel as satisfying as when I was doing crosses. I don't know if it's maybe just the color I'm using, or maybe I should use a bolder color so it's more visible. We'll see if I actually stick with this or if I end up changing things up again. But actually, because I moved the tracker up here, I had this free space on the bottom. And it was always pretty empty down here except for my total monthly expenses. But I decided to start putting down the projects I finish in a month within the columns dictated by this calendar. Mostly I wanted to do this because oftentimes at the end of the month I have a really hard time contextualizing what I managed to finish because I'm always working on multiple things at once. And it feels like I didn't do anything at all when that's not really the case. Another reason is because I realized that since I only set up my weeklies when the week starts, I found the sidebar a really useful space for noting down future tasks that I know has to be in a certain week, which I think is a much more functional use of the space than a weekly focus like I had been doing. So while I can always put down appointments and events, and any other commitments on the actual calendar when they've got exact dates, there are tasks that are more nebulous even specific ones that only have an assigned week. And I can't really put them on a set date on the calendar, so I just put them here. Anyway, I was really pleased with this, and while I didn't feel like I was losing anything with the weekly focus, I was surprised at how valuable it had become to look back on a week and see what I had actually managed to do, which was what I'd started noting down right after the weekly focus. And that's why I decided to start writing down the projects that I finished on the bottom here. And I'm only writing down big completed projects, not really small things I've accomplished, because that would just be my to-do list. Basically what all of the things on that list adds up to, which I don't really get to see anyway since they're broken down into such granular items on the weeklies. It's really nice to be able to see the finished projects that it all led up to. Another thing I changed that's not in the monthly or weekly spread is how I use this bottom section of the yearly index. I had the assigned categories for each monthly section down here before. I go more in depth on how this whole spread works in my functional planning video, and I'll link that up in the cards and description. But I decided that was a waste of such a large space, so I moved the categories up here above the index markers, since those only take up one row anyway, and down here I decided to instead use this for project planning using the months of each column. So I'm actually utilizing the calendar provided, so that's really nice. And it's really functional, especially for projects with deadlines. And I picked this up from Vegan Organizer here on YouTube. So let's go back to the weekly spread. As you can see, this new sticky note for the week is filled out as well, so when I set up for tomorrow for the coming week, I'll migrate these unfinished tasks along with the ones from the spread itself. I hope this has been somewhat informative, and I'd love to hear about how you set up at the beginning of the week, if there's something you always do to start off the week right in your books, and thank you for watching.